My name is Rizwan Akhtar. Coming here today from Washington, D.C. With a community, an organization called Green Muslims. Green Muslims is a community based in D.C. that seeks to tackle the problems and the challenges and our responsibilities that Imam Zaid had talked about through by experimenting with a few different activities, primarily service learning, promoting the concept of zero trash events, and something that we started recently, this idea of a leftar, where in Ramadan we would ask everyone to bring their leftovers for iftar, and nothing made just for that day. And it was actually surprising that we actually started off with more food from all people's leftovers. In addition to that, providing opportunities and spaces both for young professionals and youth in DC to just be in nature and to have that opportunity that may be uncomfortable for them, that may be unfamiliar to them if they haven't been exposed to being in nature, to go on hikes, and then to be with one another, to engage in spiritual reflection. Those are a few examples of what we're doing in Green Muslims. I think for myself, there are a couple anecdotes that help illustrate why I continue doing this work, why I'm motivated. One is just a beautiful fact that I found, that I recently learned, that in the soil that we touch with our bare hands, there is a bacteria, I believe it's called mycobacterium, that when it comes into contact with our bare hands, it actually increases the serotonin in our brains. It actually increases a sense of joy in ourselves. And I just found that to be such a beautiful call from Allah to come back to our nature, both our human nature and the signs around us. And the second, I believe, is we were engaged in one of our service learning activities with Green Muslims, with a group of, actually it was a Girl Scout troop, a Muslim Girl Scout troop that came to one of our events. And there was like an 8-year-old girl who apparently loved radishes. Maybe the only 8-year-old girl that loved radishes. And she goes over to the radishes. We're welcome to harvest them. She picks out just a bunch, can barely even hold on to them as she moves around. And then she sees strawberries. And she was amazed by strawberries and wanted to go for the strawberries. So she asked me, is it okay if I put the radishes on the ground and to pick up more strawberries? And I just found it to be such a beautiful moment in the sense that in her mind, she had picked up something from the ground, but when it entered her hands, it stopped being something from the ground, it became food that she needed permission to put back on the ground to set down. And I just found that to be a really beautiful insight into where young people's minds are at, and a beautiful teachable moment, and hope when we are in nature and when we engage in activities like service learning. So.
Assalamu alaikum. My name's Ramesh Kent. I work with an organization called the Permaculture Research Institute, which is based in Australia, but it has a number of branches located all over the globe. I actually had been a part of this community that's involved with Zaytuna since 1999. I've been gone for 3 years. This is my first time back in 3 years, and it's nice to see a number of familiar faces. Just to tell you a little bit about the work that the organization that I work with does or is involved with, we do primarily training and consultancy work surrounding mostly issues connected to landscape rehabilitation. Most of the areas that we operate in are located in the Middle East and North Africa. We've had some project work in Central Asia, and we actually deal with the places that are effectively dead, and we work on actually bringing them back to life. So the hope is that some of these sort of methods, these practical approaches to creating functional, productive, vibrant landscapes that are able to support human habitation, places that can support healthy societies, healthy communities, these skills and these knowledges can be brought to the fore and allowing the Muslims to really rise to the challenge, to really do the job that I believe we were charged to do, that's explicitly pointed out in the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's why I'm here, and hopefully we have a chance to speak about this at length.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening. Alhamdulillah. My name is Afroz. I'm actually from Sydney, Australia. I'm the managing director for Seekers Hub Global. I run a program in Australia which has been able to, alhamdulillah, been spread around in different parts of the world. In fact, all the way to New Zealand, Western Samoa, Fiji Islands, South Africa, and now in Malaysia. In this context of the environment, and my personal interest is to make sure that the grassroots people don't get, here's another Australian word, bamboozled. It's not Australian, okay. Alhamdulillah. Did we get that from you guys? All right. Bamboozled by the science. And so this idea of making science sensible at the spiritual and living level. If I can actually quickly share a story about one of our projects and connecting to some of the points that others were making, and this is about the identity, because the youth today particularly have an identity crisis, and this crisis arises from numerous complex circumstances they find themselves in. And cutting the long story short, we actually planted about 1,000 trees in this particular event where the local council's tractor broke down, and I needed to bring some youth over, boys, to in fact dig the holes for these trees, small trees, by hand. And one of the guys who was a close friend of mine initially rejected coming over simply because he said that, don't call me digging holes in Australia because I hate Australia. And this is the reality of matters that I think many parts of the world, in fact, the youth actually are facing from, and certainly in Australia. I said, look, don't worry about Australia, come and help me. So he came over and in fact started very hesitantly, and by the end of the day led the process of digging the hole properly and getting the plants planted. Fantastic day, 1,000 trees planted. 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from him saying to me when was the next day to actually plant more trees. That took me by surprise. So I asked him the question, a couple of weeks ago you hated Australia, now you seem to be wanting to be digging more holes. And he said something quite profound. He said it's the first time after he put his hand into the ground that he realized Australia is his home. So the environmental activism has a deep and profound connection and experience for the human being, and we will speak about that obviously in the next few days. And also I want to mention that we have to realize that when we're speaking about the environment, we should not really only be speaking about the natural environment. There are many other kinds of environments. In fact, we have the economic environment, we have the social environment, and obviously we have the spiritual environment. So we are continuously disconnecting ourselves as the human being when we are only speaking about the natural environment. I would postulate, in fact, that is arrogance. And so this is one of the issues I will be speaking a little bit more about in the next few days. And lastly, if I can share with you another story from the city that I live in, is called Bankstown in Sydney, and talking about Ramadan. I think only superficially funny because it's profoundly sad. The city I live in is the most populated Muslim city in Australia. And this particular article appeared in the Financial Review, which is the National Financial Review newspaper, asking investors to invest in this city on the industry of food in Ramadan, because the highest spike of the sales of food in the whole of Australia happens in the city which has the largest number of Muslims. In Ramadan, we buy more food than any other part of the month of the year, which is quite telling in the state we find ourselves in. And in this regard, again, something that I will be addressing in the next couple of days is that when we speak about the environment in all the various aspects, the key problem is this idea, what we speak of consumerism. And if we can let people understand beyond the science, something that our religion teaches, and this is about the love of this dunya, this is the core problem. I hope we can address that in the next few days. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ibrahim Abdul Mateen, and how's everybody doing? Okay, just wanted to make sure I saw a couple people sleeping, so just checking on folks. I come from Brooklyn, New York, and by way of right now I live in a place called Richmond, Virginia. Don't ever go there, you don't need to. No, Bismillah. It's an interesting place. It's the capital of the Confederacy, just put it in that context. They still have statues of white men that wanted me to be a slave. So I'm the author of Green Deen, What Islam Teaches About Protecting the Planet. I'm also I come from a youth organizing context. So I was an Outward Bound instructor for a couple of years, and I used to take young people out into the woods to do some really, just put it this way, one year I slept outside more than I slept inside. Literally the entire year, mashallah, it was a very beautiful year. I helped found a school called the Brooklyn Academy for Science and the Environment, which is a public high school in Brooklyn that focuses on bringing young people into the Brooklyn Botanic Garden and Prospect Park as part of their curriculum. So the idea was like tearing down the walls of sort of like traditional idea of what is a classroom, right? The classroom is everything around us. I've also worked in the mayor's office in New York City on a long-term planning and sustainability policy. So really just big things: infrastructure, water, energy, transportation, waste. The stuff that if we don't know how to manage, we're useless, I think, as people. And Imam Zayd eloquently spoke about the Islamic tradition with that. And that's the stuff that I'm slightly obsessed with. Like when I got out of grad school, I was like, I want to run the sanitation department. I want to deal with trash. And I think a lot of the problem that we have, I think, as a people is that we have a lot of solutions or ideas about things, but we have no idea how things are currently being managed. And so we'll run into a lot of like brick walls trying to deal with that. And I'll just say briefly, a lot of idealistic people, and a lot of them come from the Bay, you know what I mean? They come and they want to change the world. And they go around the globe and they're like, we have the right way to do things. And a lot of idealistic people come out of school and they go to a place and they'll be like, you know what, we want to make this better. And they'll go to a place like New York City where the commissioner of sanitation, and it's just something to think about, the commissioner of sanitation, now sanitation departments in the Western context started in New York City. The idea was to clean the streets. It wasn't to deal with the trash in an effective way. It was just clear the streets of horse manure. That's essentially what it was about. Just like paved roads didn't come about because of cars, it came about because people liked bicycles, right? Like that's the history of those things. But the idea of clearing the streets, the guy who's the commissioner of sanitation in New York City right now, he started out as a street sweeper in the 1960s. What on earth is some idealistic person going to say to some guy who's now the commissioner and has worked his way up? So what my argument is here is that we need translators. We need people that can speak in the language of the people who are actually managing and running these institutions and running them in a way that is effective for what their purpose is now, to subtly change that culture over time. The other thing I want to make sure I say is, and this is something that I feel very, very, very strongly about. A lot of my family are Christians, and one thing that Christians do incredibly well is that they tell stories of transformation. They tell current, modern stories of real people, real stories of real human beings that people can identify with and connect with. Muslims, we never do that. We rarely tell stories of people's conversion. What I would argue for, and I would argue for the panel to think about, for the people in the room, for the educators, to tell inspirational stories of transformation that have ecologically relevant meanings. So fold the ecological ideas, fold the Muslim environmental, fold those ideas into your conversations. Don't make it overtly, this is about the environment. I'm gonna beat this over the head. You green fool, you gotta be green. But to figure out a way to blend that stuff into these stories of transformation in a way so that our young people are infused with them from the very beginning. So the idea of transformation and the idea of these inspirational stories of contemporary people are real people that they can connect with. So those are just, inshallah, those are the things that I would like to convey, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.